Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 through 20. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and holding fast to him. For that means life to you, and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob.
I am not going to touch Matthew today.
Why not? That's a good passage.
It is a good passage, but the Matthew passage just requires way too much drilling down to fully understand it. And that's something that would be more for a Bible study. I would do that particular passage out of Matthew probably in a 2-hour study. And I've only got about 10 minutes. So I want to instead talk about the Deuteronomy passage. I want to back up just a little bit back to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. And I've chopped just a little piece out of this, but this is basically it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged, and that it will go well with you in the land that the Lord your God gives you. Honor your father and your mother, and you will live a long time. And you'll live a long time in the place that God gives you. In our passage from Deuteronomy today, this is the final part of his 26 chapter sermon. It begins in the 4th chapter of Deuteronomy and goes all the way through the 30th chapter. It is 26 chapters long, is this sermon that he's given. And this is the end of it. This is the tail end of it. But at the very beginning of this, first off, he gives the 10 Commandments and he gives a whole list of rules and stuff. But he also gives some instruction about what they're going to do when they get into the Promised Land. And what he tells them is that once you have gotten into the Promised Land and you have established yourself well enough that you've conquered enough territory that you've got a bridgehead into the land, what I want you to do is I want to send half of you, and he names off the list of tribes that he wants to do this. I want half of you to go up on Mount Ebal. And the other half of you, I want you to go up on Mount Gerizim. These are 2 mountains that are found in the Promised Land, right not too far away from the place where Jericho was, because that's where they first initially go into the Promised Land. And they do that. Half of the tribes go up on Mount Ebal, and half of the tribes go up on Mount Gerizim. Now that happens long after this speech, but at the very beginning of this speech, Moses tells them that's what you're going to do. And then he goes into this long sermon, and here at the end of the sermon, he says, See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his way, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. Does that not sound a lot like honor your father and your mother, and you will live a long time, and you will live well in the land that I'm giving you? Doesn't that sound the same? God is telling them in no uncertain terms that you are to treat me like your father or your mother, your parent. And you honor me. If you honor me, then you will get into the land of promise, and you will live a long and happy and healthy life. That's what he's telling them. In the 24th chapter of, who's next? Joshua. In the 24th chapter of Joshua, there is a scene where Joshua pretty much gives this same message. He's a lot short. He's not as long-winded as Moses is. Moses, again, 26th chapter. Joshua cuts it down to about 3 chapters. But as he gets toward the end of his inspirational speech, here we are, we're in the land of promise, let's move forward together. At the end of that speech, he comes down to choose. Make a choice. Life or death. It's the same exact thing that Moses tells them here. Moses, in this scene, they're standing on the edge of the promised land. They're in Moab, looking across the Jordan into the promised land. They haven't crossed over yet. Moses is still with them. Moses hasn't passed the mantle on to Joshua yet. He hasn't gone up onto the hill and disappeared into Nebo and disappeared. That hasn't happened yet. He's still in charge. And he says, today I'm giving you a choice. Today. And this is an emphatic. This is a today. This isn't a kind of like an oh today thing, a generalized. This is today, an emphatic. Right now, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice. We have just wandered out of the wilderness of death. We've just come out of the wilderness and we're standing on the promise. We're standing on the edge of the promise. Where do you want to go? You want to turn around and go back into the death of the desert? You're going to go back into the wilderness? You can. Moses is giving them that choice right now. Make a decision. Follow me into the kingdom, into the promised land, into the paradise, into the promise. Or turn around and head back off into the wilderness, and another generation will die, and maybe the next generation after that will come back to this spot and make the right choice. That's your choice. That's what Moses is telling them. Make your choice today. Death or life. What do you want to do? At the end of Joshua, the book of Joshua, in the chapter, I'm pretty sure it's in the chapter 24, Joshua gives the people almost an identical place, an identical question. Choose life or choose death. Now, where Moses can say, you choose life or death because I'm not going to be with you. You have to choose and then follow Joshua into the promise because I'm going to end up on Mount Nebo and disappear. So there's that. But Joshua isn't there. Joshua says, choose life or choose death. Me and my family, we choose life. That's what he said. Me and my family, we choose life. We're going to go across. We're going to cross into the promised land. We're going to stay. And we're going to obey God. We're going to listen to God. We're going to honor God. We're going to honor our parent. And Moses there, here in this scene, is laying that out for them also. Make a choice. Life or death. Go into the promise with me and you'll live a long and happy and healthy life. Or go back out into the wilderness and die. Make a choice today. We make these choices all the time. We really do. We make these choices every day. Life or death. Whether we're going to move forward in one direction or backwards into another. We make these choices all the time. Moses had left them with this choice also. And I think each one of us every day has to make this choice in some form or another. Today, I decide I'm going to follow God. Today, I'm going to decide to follow Jesus. Today, I'm going to follow into the promise, into the kingdom. Today, that's my choice. And tomorrow again, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to have to choose. How am I going to live today? Am I going to live for the kingdom or am I going to live for death? I'm going to live for life or for death. And every day we wake up and make that same choice. Every time we're confronted with something that is a difficult choice, we have to make the choice, life or death. And I hope we always choose life. I always choose to move into the kingdom. One of the other things about this passage is Moses is kind of summoning up, putting it all together. Can't say the word today, I'm a little tongue-tied. In the 15th chapter, he talks about canceling debt of the poor. In the 16th chapter, he talks about how the government should guard against excess wealth. In the 19th chapter, he talks about limiting punishment to protect human dignity. In the 20th chapter, he talks about restricting the draft. In the 23rd chapter, he talks about hospitality to runaway slaves. 24th, he talks about fair wages. In the 24th also, he talks about leaving part of the harvest for those who need it. It is interesting that those are all kind of social issues we're still dealing with today. We even have the draft, and although we haven't reinstituted the draft, we do register for the draft. It's still part of our culture. And so that's part of what Moses says. Here are some of the things that we can live into. But also he says it's the right choice means blessing for the entire community. Not just for some, but for the entire community. The right choice is a home not just for God, but for the resident alien as well. The right choice is for economic policies that leave enough for everyone. The right choice is an equal distribution of resources. These are all things that Moses said. I'm not making this up. Moses said these exact things. He said these are how we should be. These are the right choices we should be making. And finally, that choice, if we make the right choice is life. And that is what God desires for us. God desires for us to choose life, to move forward, to be in communion with each other, to be in communion with God, to be in family together. And that is the right choice. And so, we as a body, we as a people, we as individuals, make choices about who is with us and who is not with us, about who is moving forward and who is not moving forward. Most of the time it is our own choice, whether we want to move forward with the promise or not. But every day we're faced with these choices. And so, in light of what Moses talks to us about, in light of what Joshua talks to about, in light of how Jesus teaches us how we are to live, let us always choose life. Let us always choose to go forward with God and forward into the kingdom and forward into the promise. Amen.